Today we're going to be learning about terms of trade, which is related to comparative advantage and sounds ridiculously scary when I describe it at first, but it's really a lot more simple than it sounds. The upshot is it doesn't often show up on the AP test for micro. This is much more of a macro thing, but it does have the tendency to show up every so often. So just in case, let's go over it very quickly. Um, Basically, when you find the opportunity cost for two economies, a good term of trade will fall in between those opportunity costs for the product. So if you're making guns and butter, and for each country, for country A, the opportunity cost for making butter is 2 units of guns, and the other country, country B, has an opportunity cost of a half a unit of guns for every unit of butter. Then, if you have a terms of trade for 1 unit of gun for 1 unit of butter, that is a good term of trade because it falls in between the opportunity costs. Now, if you did it flipping, if you switched everything to do um, the other opportunity costs, taking the reciprocals of everything, it should still fall within those parameters. If a term of trade exceeds a country's opportunity cost, then it's only beneficial to the economy who is producing that product. Now, like I said, this sounds scary until you actually get into working with it, and then it's a lot more simple. So here's an example that I use on a quiz in macro. You have two countries, alpha and beta. You have alpha with an absolute advantage in both products. Alpha can produce grain, 30 units of grain or 30 units of steel. Beta can only produce 10 units of grain or 20 units of steel. So when we're examining this question, we already know that there's at least one answer that is not going to work, and that's the last one. So you can cross that one out because we know the absolute advantage has nothing to do with trade. So we already got rid of that part. Now, if we're looking at this, we have to figure out the opportunity costs. So for alpha, we'll do that on the left-hand side of the screen. Sorry for my bad handwriting. For alpha, to produce 1 unit of steel, they have to give up 1 unit of grain. And to give up, to make 1 grain, they have to give up 1 unit of steel. For beta, which we'll do on the other side, and as always, I'm sorry about my bad handwriting. For beta, if they are producing steel, so 1 steel, they have to give up, and this is an output problem, remember, I forgot to say that before, so other goes over, they have to give up 1/2 unit of grain. That means to produce 1 grain, they give up 2 units of steel. So if these are our opportunity costs, we now have to figure out the terms of trade. So if we're talking in terms of grain being the one that's the single one here, so we then have to look at these bottom two. 1 grain, what each of their opportunity costs is to produce 1 unit of grain. So for country A, for country alpha, that's 1 unit of steel. For country beta, it's 2 units of steel. So the terms of trade that are beneficial has to fall between that. There's only one of these that falls between that, and that is B, 1.5. So the other way to look at this is, does this work if you turn it into steel for grain? So if you did this for steel for grain, we could say 1 unit of steel should then equal, you take the reciprocal of 1.5, so 3/2 turns into 2/3. Does this now fall in between our in between our opportunity costs. So 2/3, does that fall in between? Well, we have 1 and we have 1/2. 2/3 is greater than 1/2, but less than 1. So yes, this works as well. You should always see that relationship. If it's different, if it's, say, A, if A was offered to you as the answer, and who does this benefit? It benefits whoever produces grain because they are getting a greater amount of steel than they technically should be. So, in terms of this problem, the country that should be producing grain is going to be country alpha. So, if we were to do this, alpha would win, but beta wouldn't. You then go down the line. That you should find that for all of them. Now you might say, well, what about this one? Well, the thing for that is it's not really beneficial for country alpha. It is an even trade for them. They're not really getting anything out of it. They're not increasing their consumption. They're essentially staying on their own production possibilities curve, but with trade. So that one's not really disadvantageous, but the key word here is advantageous. So that's why that's the case. Now, this one, since it falls underneath the opportunity cost for alpha, you'd actually find that that benefits beta, but not alpha. So hopefully that explanation cleared things up for you. Most problems just are along these lines of identifying which is the advantageous terms of trade, and you just look in between the two comparative advantages. That's it. The only way it gets a little bit more difficult is if it asks you to identify who is benefiting from a specific term of trade. And even then, it's not that difficult. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions.